Hello, this is Brian O'Haron again with episode 4 of Spreading the Word. I started this program a few weeks ago because Section 10.6 was taken out of the P&Z regulations. It was for unconforming property owners, which is about 80% of at least the lake people, and many other people in the town also need it when they want to add one thing or another to their property, improve their property, and increase the tax base. So everybody's interested. This program is intended to spread the word so that you all know when the next public hearing is. It's on September 20th, if that comes true, when many of the lake and town people are not here. I would advise you to stay here if you live on the lake and go to the public hearing, or come back from wherever you are to state your concerns at the public hearing. We really need people who have a need and want to improve their property to understand what these new, totally rewritten public planning and zoning regulations will be, and have a chance to get their word in now before they become the law and may remain for another 10 years or more. So pay attention, sign the petition as it comes around, listen to the program tonight, see if you can learn something. On May 23rd, 2016, the Planning and Zoning Commission held a meeting that lasted about 45 minutes. I have reduced it to 30 minutes. I have obtained a voice recording of this meeting, edited down to 30 minutes, the regulation parts of this meeting. They contain a section on Section 10.6 and a presentation of the regulations, and I will play them for you now. Please listen carefully. This may be important for you and your family.
As you all are well aware, in our past meeting, we were really at an impasse and able to adjudicate anything because the 10.6 by our own town attorney's definition does not have any restrictions. It is completely devoid because of the way the Highland Lake District is posed, is that all coverages are included. There are no, Steve was at the meeting, we were virtually told there was nothing that we had that we could stand on or that we could represent or to the applicant that was against their doing what they did. So, I mean, he said it was absolutely an abysmal regulation. I realize you've been presented tonight with the new regs, but there's going to be a time frame that is going to be necessary before they will be implemented. In the interim, I would like to see that we, my opinion, would disregard or completely eradicate 10.6 from our regs. I know this is going to necessitate public hearing and there will be a time frame involved. However, if there is any lag between the other, it gives us at least the opportunity to forestall a mass exodus towards. That's my opinion. I'm expressing it. It's open to discussion. Go ahead, Jay.
I'm one that sometimes I read a regulation and I think I read it what it is and it isn't. And this presentation pointed out, I always felt that coverage was going to be impervious surface. So if you got a paved driveway, you you've got a home, you've got sheds, you've got a garage.
You got
There's your calculation of impervious or coverage. It was pointed out very clearly that our regulation just says driveways and buildings. And when you look at what Attorney Grimes presented to us, step back a minute, 10.6 I always thought of as somebody comes in and has a request to expand their footprint in a way that's not going to make the non-conforming issues more non-conforming. So if you've got a 50-foot front yard setback and you're only, you're 75 feet from the road, you've got 25 feet to go further toward that dimension. However, coverage always in my mind, because the bulk table, or the building table, talks about coverage. And again, I read in impervious, and it's not.
Right.
So Steve had mentioned that maybe there was a way to modify the agreement, or the 10.6, to add a third item in there that talks about not violating any issue in the zoning tables. But with that definition of coverage and what was presented to us, they had like 42 or 43% coverage existing when you calculated all their gravel driveway and their buildings and so forth, and they reduced it a few percent. So they, in fact, if that's the way it's interpreted, they made the reduction so that it fit.
Correct.
So I would agree with you, Craig. I think that the thing that should be done, because I don't think that was ever the intention when that was put in there, that kind of a tack could be taken legally. So I would suggest that I support you. We should put an advertisement out, put it into a public hearing, and make the motion to remove it. We have removed it from
The new regs.
the new regs. And what that does, and I'm a firm believer, right now, 10.6 lets you put a building on the same footprint and expand it into something that's not going to make it more non-conforming. And this one application that came in last meeting was one where we had like 1.6 feet off of one side yard. I mean, it was only a very narrow lot to begin with. I think that if we do away with that, and an applicant comes, there's a lot of properties up there at the lake that people would like to get and like to do a better job of building residence. If they came in and they didn't get held to that 1.6, for instance, feet, and they were able to better site the building, even though it's a small lot, and they don't increase the coverage that we presume, will be accepted in the new regulations, or even in the existing regulations, because they really haven't changed on the Highland Lake District with regards to the table, then maybe we're going to get a home that's got, instead of a 1.6 feet on a 50-foot wide lot, maybe we'll get, 10 feet, so that it's a better use of the property. And with what's coming into the new regulations that we're proposing is that you have an incentive in there to gain some coverage if, in fact, you do more on-site recharging the ground, and not just putting into a pipe and running it someplace that's going to impact somebody somewhere. So I would support what you're talking about, and hopefully we can start that ball rolling.
It's only, I was in the meeting with Kevin before the hearing, before Friday night's end. I mean, I argued with him vehemently, but I mean, he came right out, and Pearlie, came right forward and said, "I got you."
Well, so just to add to what you're saying, I voted against that night. And I knew darn well, first of all, I saw it was going to pass. So I just kind of voted as just frustration, I guess. It didn't make any difference because it passed. And had there not been a vote to pass it, I would have voted to pass it because we would have been into litigation and we would never win.
Oh, he would have been in court the next day.
But I just so everybody has an idea, because it's kind of counterproductive to oppose something. A lawyer telling you kill it. It's a loser.
Well, I wasn't here, but I think it goes all the way back to what happened when Scott Eisenlohr
Yeah.
did what he did, and,
Well, 10.6, the way it was we were indefensible.
well, I understand that, but I know, but also it goes back to where
Oh,
Scott.
absolutely.
Well, that's true.
And
There's no argument.
coverage, and no building permits, and
David,
no
you all
this,
right?
and no that. You all right?
Yeah, fine.
Cramping his leg.
But that's the other issue, that things were done in the past that I think now,
Right.
Steve is on
Coming
board.
back to haunt us.
We're not going to have these decisions made or lack of enforcement of things that really catch us in situations like that, because people do things based on somebody who's working for the towns, whether they got the authority or they don't, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, do I have a,
I agree with it. I think all of us need.
I think we should make a motion, do we not?
Well, I don't think you need, well,
Yeah,
it's
motion.
not.
Yeah,
You don't have to need a motion?
We don't,
35 days, I gotta notify the,
Okay.
property at least 35 days in advance, so we can figure out how quick we can do it after that.
That's
Couple
fine.
meetings down the road.
so what, you need 35 days to notice everybody?
Yeah, it has to be sent to COG, I think it's 35 days before the hearing.
That's right.
So
It's gonna
that's,
go.
so it's gonna be 3 meetings down the road at least,
Okay.
depending on the timing and number of days.
I just think we should put it in place just in case it's
Is
any.
there a consensus?
I
Pardon?
agree.
Is there a consensus?
Yeah, because they had a,
Yes.
I thought Mike probably had us between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's good at that, so.
This meeting was held last May. Now for the meeting on the new regulations.
The next item is, I asked David Villa to come. He has been a vigilant member of the subcommittee, George and myself. And I must say, George and Dave spent hours of,
Can't stand detention?
No, sir. If that was the case, then you'd be standing for me, Chief. However, that's not, I don't come here to present a military bearing. I came here to give you an oversight in terms of what's been transpiring since this work group has been put together some 9.5, 10 months ago. In your packet, no doubt you found which the folio that comprises the 11th draft we've gone through. And this is a culmination of step-by-step beginning in August. It was made aware to us painfully after review of the existing regulations. Even that template was not useful because it's one combination of revisions on top of the other. Some of them date back to about 1963. It was also established, as painfully shown to you 2 weeks ago in this panel, the 10-6 process that came into being in these regulations gives you the authority to violate your own rules, which it does. And I'm surprised that some savvy lawyer hadn't picked up on it a long time ago, but certainly the counsel that was here is very skillful. And we took it in a positive way. It was actually an educational experience that we doubled down on illustrations, definitions, glossaries, explanations inside the regulations where there is no doubt what we mean when we use a particular term, as opposed to what the dictionary might reflect, as the learned colleague pointed out, or counselor pointed out to you. The regulations also grew down. As under your rules right now, there's 26 different zones and different combinations. They're measured in different ways. They're not drawn on property lines. They're kind of a jigsaw puzzle. They don't make any sense when you lay it out on a map. Not at all. The most glaring one is the Highland Lake District. Highland Lake uses, according to your rules, 1,000 feet from the high water mark of that lake, which changes almost on a daily basis. Now, there's no indication of how to draw that line. There's no indication, there's no definition how it's to occur. Is it fly by night? As the crow flies, how does it work? So there are a lot of open issues that are existing in your rules. So identifying them, it became painfully clear that if we're going to, the rules that exist now are just not helpful. So in concert with the consultant, and this is prior to Steve's arrival, suggested a template with some boilerplate regulations in it. And that's when we started to add in the town information, more and more of the town information, and see how it looked. And it was like going back to college, where the professor gave you the reading, and you spent hours going through it. At one point, around the 9th draft, about a month ago, we went line by line through it. Well, I did. And it was a report sent in. So, what made sense, what didn't make sense, what was in conflict internally, what were we missing, what didn't make sense. In the map, excuse me, that you've got, the proposed zoning map, you'll see that we're down to 6.5 zones, really. So you've got the Highland Lake District, which is now comprised of a contiguous body of property that runs along Wakefield Boulevard. That all the maps are drawn on property lines. They're not drawn haphazard, as the crow flies near this rock and over here, and because that was the process that was used, and there's some definite issues about how that all occurred and what transpired at that point. So these are clearly identifiable. There's no overlapping lots. There's no lot that's got 2 zones in it. It's all samey. So if you're in that lot, that's what you got. That's the zone you're in. The other issue was its actual composition. And it became clear that if we're going to get down to 6.5 zones or 7 zones, which the industrial reuse is a very, very small zone, if you're going to do that, how can we create a document that's going to be easy to read, easy to understand, and if you identify the lot you own, you know what zone it's in. So then you take how we've crafted it. So there's the common regulations town-wide. They just tell for everything we do. Then in each specific zone, there are additional requirements specific to that zone. And that we go down to setbacks, lot coverage, bulk table, everything. What is permitted inside of it, what uses are permitted inside of it. So at that point, we literally, whether you know it or not, there's 97 block maps in this town, 97 that comprise the town on our records. We went through all 97 of them. So I don't know how much more graphic or finite or molecular we can go to identify where the actual property lines are and that what their current uses are. One of the features of the recommended regulations, and I know it's topical in town, everybody talks about the town center, and Main Street in particular, what can we do to help and facilitate the use of these buildings? And one of the ideas we came up is in the current regulations, they talk about parking. Everybody's got to have a little bit of assigned parking. Well, we departed from that. And we've actually walked Main Street 11 o'clock at night and see who's out here. See how many cars are out on 44. And basically the idea was they're not all here at the same time. So at 9 o'clock in the morning out in front of this building, there are a lot fewer, they're here. But as you go further north, there's fewer and fewer cars, and they're pocketed. So at 9:30 at night, there's the same number of cars, but they're using different spots in different places. So we came with the idea of parking in common, so that different buildings will have use of the street parking, because there's very little publicly owned parking downtown. But it's one less burden that a person who wants to make an investment into Main Street will have to bear. The other side of it too was that when you look at the buildings here, once you hit the Cumberland Farms until you get past the library, you'll see that most of the buildings are about 95% coverage. We don't have a wish list. It's what's here. Unless short of catastrophe, those buildings are not going anywhere. So why belabor the point about how much coverage you're dealing with? It's a non-issue. It's a non-start. So, our recommendation is don't even bother with it, because there's no sense to it. If there was new construction on the street, that's fine. The last piece that became obvious were the gateways, as you can see. The in and out on 44 and the 800 and 8 North corridors. That's where we believe there's the town is positioned to do some expansion. received information or indications from various people who want to see this happen, because it not only makes their property more valuable, it also gives a location for, you know, what's coming into the town of Winchester. The reason we went through from 26 down to 6, 7 zones, it's just like that shield. It basically talks about what the town is. It's Winchester Center, Quarter, the Manor area, Highland Lake, and then Main Street. And there's no more Winstead. It's the town of Winchester, and Winstead is a name on a post office and a signpost. And you know, one of the issues is that it's a remarkable part of our history. It should be facilitated, and these regulations permit that to happen. I'd be happy to answer any question you may have, or individually or collectively. I know that I'm satisfied with the outcome. I've done the damnedest to get it done as quickly as we can. I know it's been vetted by an attorney that you've paid for, the town has paid for. I know that the consultant will be out to make a formal presentation of the impact of these regulations. I know he's in possession of them, as you are now. But there's been a back and forth going for months. But most people who know me, I don't satisfy easy, but I'm satisfied with these regs that we've done absolutely everything to facilitate the growth in town in an orderly, conscious way, liberating Main Street and being orderly about the development that remains at the Highland Lake District, which is a big impact on this town. No less impact than Winchester Center has, and that has to be safeguarded and protected.
Yeah, and going through rural residential, minimum lot area, 85,000 square feet, minimum lot width, 200 feet.
Yes.
Where I live, Moore Avenue,
Yeah, but
both sides.
Yeah, but it's a different, you're in a different zone. You're in the,
It's in gray, rural.
yeah, but there's two kinds. Which map you got there, Arthur?
I'm looking at the draft map of the colorings,
Huh?
Dave.
I don't know which map you got.
This one.
All right,
Here's Moore Avenue.
These are, yeah, Moore Avenue, but that's not all the way down Moore Avenue.
It's all gray.
Yeah, below, see, it is this is a more accurate piece.
And here we are, here's Moore Avenue.
All right.
Every one of those lots are not even half acres.
The map is a representation. I know we spoke about it early this morning about it. You know, that's going to need some tuning.
I think it should be considered non-residential.
Well, no, see, that's a part of a discussion that should ensue at your level. I'm merely transmitting what we were able to accomplish. All right, this is a fungible document, there's no stonework in here.
Yeah, there's several areas like that are, it was the old R1 zone, which is basically a 40,000 square foot
Right.
lot.
Yeah.
Like Sucker Brook where I live is that way.
Yeah, they're 40, but we're not even.
Right.
Some of the lots
Now,
are half acre.
these regulations, if they're adopted, are going to go from 40,000 to 85,000.
Right.
It's in the rural areas.
And that's what Sucker Brook is.
Yeah, I know it's rural. That's why
And
it's
all those lots are 40,000 square foot
I know.
lots. Right. So,
You just won't be making any more.
Yeah.
No, I realize that.
People can still use them.
they're grandfathered. I
Yeah.
understand. Everything's grandfathered with that. It's just something coming in with a new subdivision.
Don't go to 2 acres.
Would have to go to 2 acres. Because there are two large parcels of property on that one road that could be subdivided at some point.
The question is, do you
I'm all
want
in
bigger
favor
lots
of
or 2 acre
I
lots?
have no problem with it.
That's what's there.
Yeah.
But I think that this now, you know, coming to the full board has the opportunity to really get into it.
To fine tune it. Yeah.
Fine tune it
No,
before it
it's
gets-
a great job that the committee did.
Oh, I agree. I'm just, you know,
Make our life
like you said,
easier.
You nitpicking.
Well,
No, I'm not
It's been a pain, Art.
one of the things to your point, Pete, is that the rules are constructed in
Didn't
such
see
a
you there
way
any nights.
as to make it easier
Mornings.
for any
Never mind.
successor panels here
Right.
in terms of
I walked the street
definition
at
and
11.
clarity, but I mean in terms of process. There's always been a discussion about what belongs where. Does it belong here or does it belong with the ZBA? Well, we say where the things belong.
Exactly.
The other issue is that whether is it a minor project or a major project. And we define the differences between the two. One of the things that we also talked about that have been painfully inadequate over the years is the paper process within the town, what records, and that became painfully apparent tonight. One of the other issues that we talked about was bonding, partially complete projects over the winter time. You're going to come back, you got to put up a bond. If you got something incomplete like shrubbery, rose, whatever.
And
you
one of
put
the
up
things,
a
I haven't
bond.
looked through this, but like in the rural section, one of the things that, if it isn't in here, needs to be added in any subdivisions, 5 or more houses, you have to look at fire protection.
Yeah, well, sure.
You have to look at cisterns.
Yes.
Which is, the developer has to put in, which has never been in the regulations, which I based about for.
That's
20
usually-
Well,
years.
no, you're preaching to the choir, Pete, because
No, I know.
I've been down that road.
No, I know, you've been with it, I mean,
The point,
but that's one of the things that.
yeah, but I mean, this is not a fluff document.
Yeah.
This is as close as we can get
Well,
it
it
for
was
you.
367.
And you got it now.
Now's the time to put it in.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. The other thing was
They're not conforming law.
the glossary, they even talk about terms and phrases and so forth, but there's a whole list of appendix
Right.
components.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look through the whole thing.
But
I'm
that, we
saying that's
try
one of the
to
things
set
that.
up, because so
we need
many
to look
things
at.
can be in the appendix, it doesn't take the public hearing.
Change it out.
References, but it'll be a source that you can go to, instead of having now search here, search there.
Yes, yep.
So you've got an element in the regulations, the way they're constructed, that you've got a live session inside it. So that if some procedure in town hall changes or something happens, you take or this appellate courts make a decision that's contrary to something you've got in the appendix, you just take the old one out, put the new one in, and button it back up. The regulations are not intended to be easily altered once you lock them up. And that should be the way it should be for at least a period of time, because the regulations you have now are, as a result, and not to point fingers at anybody, but I mean, it's not necessary, that was a more than planned obsolescence. As I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The regulations that you've got, that you're stuck with at the moment, are the single most, at least in my opinion, the single most reason why there's no development in town of Winchester. They're awful. They're awful to maneuver. So, we've thought about it. What do we want this town to look like after we're all long and gone? So I appreciate you giving me the responsibility. I try to execute it in such a way you'd be happy with it. But as I said, I'm satisfied with the outcome. I would be remiss of me not to thank Pam and Steve for their work. We've had great cooperation from that office. We've had great cooperation from the town assessors, clerks, anybody that we asked anything for, it was right there on the spot we got it. So we spent a lot of legwork, a lot of detail work. But it would be remiss if I didn't. Particularly Pam, she suffered through the scrawling and doing all the retyping lately. But I mean, she was beyond our expectation. I just need to point that out to you.
She's a good person when she's asleep.
Your characterizations, Mr. Melcher, are not welcome.
And we want to thank you too for
Thank
your
you.
participation.
No problem.
All of you.
Well, actually,
It's done a lot of work on it,
George,
that's for sure.
It's something that should have been done years ago.
Steve, Pam.
I don't know how much money's left. Steve would have a better handle on it, but we've come pretty much to the brick wall on that as well. So we didn't go over, and we haven't kind of spent it all yet. But I'm sure there'll be a whole net bucket pretty soon. But I don't. We left a few bucks in there. So I would just ask you to carefully review the document. It's not something you're going to take home in a weekend and get through, because after a while your eyes hurt from reading it. But it is linear in construction, so it's easy to follow. But the real deal is common regulations and then the zone regulations on top, and that makes it simple.
Well, the other thing that I have never seen in a document like this is an index.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that
That's the
when we first
nicest thing in the
started,
world.
Yeah.
I said, let's have an index. Actually, the Sean Suter said he's never seen one either. And he had to struggle a little bit to put it together, but I think that's going to be real helpful. Because
Well,
I
it's
can't tell you
helpful
how many
for everyone.
times
Yeah,
you
it's
get prepared for a
business-friendly.
meeting and to search everything out in the document and look it up wherever it happens. It's amazing. But Craig, can we set this up on the first meeting, the next meeting as a planning meeting to air
Have it in
that
discussion.
commissioners,
Absolutely.
if we could hold that without regular applications, so we can really make some progress on this. I mean, that's just my point.
Yeah, I have no problem. I think that could,
I think we can make accomplish a lot
I
of
do.
ground if we.
I would ask all of you to look at this and give it serious consideration and come forth with constructive comments. Dave, thank you for all your efforts.
I'm your neighbor, I live in this town.
Well, that was the meeting back in May when the P&Z Commission discussed Section 10.6 and the future total rewrite of the planning and zoning regulations that has been needed for many, many years. I happen to be a believer in the way other people do things. They use more of an evolutionary approach by changing the regulations when a need arises, a serious need arises. They also change their POCD as often as they need to. They don't wait 10 years like we do. We have all kinds of reasons and excuses. There's a lot of politics involved. We do change our government every 2 years, one way or the other. We have a different town manager every 2 years or so, on average, one way or the other. Often with totally different viewpoints, psychologies, philosophies, and other thought processes. Many of them aren't qualified to do the jobs or be on the commissions. The people on the commissions are appointed by the people who win the elections and have the most votes, and they're usually done with a political motive or a political approach or a political philosophy as their main concern. Some don't want any development at all. They want us to be more like Litchfield or Goshen. You heard a bit of that in this meeting. The word Winchester is a word they're trying to push now because the word Winsted has a bad connotation throughout the world on the internet and elsewhere, in the newspapers too. There is a need for balance. There's no doubt that these P&Z regulations had to be rewritten, but they're rewritten by a group of people that have a certain philosophy and approach for the growth of the town. What's needed now, very, very urgently, is a check and balance on these new proposed regulations by the citizens, residents, property owners, business owners, and taxpayers in the town. That's why we're spreading the word here to get everybody to pay attention. We're imbalanced now. Most people don't even know what's in these new regulations or what's in these new proposed regulations. Therefore, they don't know much about it. And they can't be of much help because they're not stepping up and speaking their mind. Now, I have told many people who've asked me recently to speak up and speak my mind and try to help all the residents, citizens, and taxpayers in the town, because that's my nature. And I don't have much to lose because I have no revenue coming in from this town. Most of my revenue is going out to the town, not coming in. Other people, one way or another, are dependent upon the town for their way of life. They earn their money here, and they spend their money here. Their family is growing up here. They're trying to evolve their properties where practical and possible. And they don't really want to get involved in anything that's controversial or can be controversial, because they don't want to lose business. They don't want to lose friends. They don't want to have their children attacked in the school system by other people making fun of them. They don't want all their relatives and friends being made fun of or making fun of them. They all want to get along together, especially at the lake, where they want to play cards together, and they want to have social events together. It's very, very difficult for the lake people as well, and a lot of people in town and a lot of people in Winchester, because they leave after Labor Day to go back to their own main home, and with the exception of information they read in the paper or on the internet, they don't really know too much about what's going on in the town. They do have a tendency to hear all the bad news, but they're all pretty busy in their own areas during the winter and other times. So it's very important that anybody watching this program and listening to this information passes the word on. Spread the word. Tell everybody you know in your neighborhood and town, all your relatives and friends, and your enemies, if you can talk to them, that they better pay attention to what's going on with these new planning and zoning regulations that are being totally rewritten. But most of the people in town don't know anything about them. So what we're trying to do is spread the word, get as many people as we can to pay attention, especially if they think they may have a need for their own property over the next 10 years, or future owners may have a need for improving the property over the next 10 years, or their children and grandchildren may have a need for improving the property over the next 10 years. Once these regulations get through the public hearing and get voted in by the majority on the Planning and Zoning Commission, it will be very difficult to change them. Be very difficult indeed. The only chance would be if a different group of people became in charge, who believed in more of an evolutionary approach to growing the town, defining the P&Z regulations, and trying to plan for success and get things done. I have another program that's on weekly, which is called Financial Winstead. And on Financial Winstead, we're trying to get the proper information out to everybody in the town of Winchester, city of Winstead, so they know where we're headed financially. And they can see how we've done over the last 12 years, despite all our various problems, and what it's likely to happen to our finances over the next 3 to 5 years. So on that program, we will be taking advantage of the recent completion of the 2014-2015 audit to bring the 12-year spreadsheets up to date with the history of our finances in our town, revenue, expenses, etc., and use that information and other known facts to extrapolate the revenue and expenses for the town of Winchester, city of Winston, for the next 3 to 5 years. This is a Harvard Business School approach that most MBAs understand, and the Harvard Business School approach is now taught throughout the country and elsewhere. Now, politicians, which a lot of these people are that are involved in defining these regulations, don't really like you to see plans based upon accurate information, because then they might have to meet the objectives that are discussed in these plans. Businessmen, however, cannot work without plans and pipelines of future revenue and expenses for 3 to 5 years that are changed every 3 months as things change. They don't like, businessmen love to have that information, and they have to be measured. And if they can't cut the mustard, they'll have to improve or they will be replaced. Here we have a very weak finance board made up of ex-school, third grade school teacher, principal of a school, teachers from schools, and most of our finance board is not very strong at all. Now, I will say that in other towns that do have strong finance boards, they still have problems, especially in the Rust Belt here in Connecticut, because taxes are high, revenue is short, expenses are high, and I've said on my other program, people are voting with their feet. They're leaving Connecticut. They're leaving Torrington, especially businesses. They're not coming into this area because it's not an inviting area. It's not comfortable for them financially. They can do much better elsewhere. So it's a tough situation we're in. That's why it's very important for everybody to be concerned and to participate in your government. You can attend the public hearings. You can get somebody to advise you on the regulations. And then you can speak your mind at the public hearings or before the public hearings by calling the town manager or the planning office. And throughout your life in this area. We have one former third grade school teacher on the Board of Finance who has to recuse himself on about 65% of our budget discussions because he's involved with the schools in an important position. We have a mayor that always wants people to do what she thinks is right for Highland Lake and the town, but doesn't do it herself. We have a Board of Selectmen and a Board of Finance that doesn't like to follow the charter. And we had a Board of Education that didn't like to follow the state statutes. Not very good for our town. Now, our commissions, although everybody means well, they're all very nice people trying to do their best to help out, don't know much at all about growing the revenue base. Although they say they do, as you heard in tonight's meetings, they don't really know how to do it because they've been in charge now for many years, especially in planning and zoning and in the finance board. And they haven't been able to do beans. They haven't been able to grow the advantageous revenue. They've stalled all of the good projects that wanted to come to town in the years before the 2008 crash. Many of the people that were trying to come to town did get their permits, but they were stalled and stalled and stalled by the extreme environmentalists in the town and at the lake, hoping that they would find an Indian burial ground, some rare animals, some rare clams in the lake, or anything that might force the developers to drop their plans and leave town. We don't have any development to speak of down the Route 8 corridor in the enterprise zone to Torrington. That would be a big help for our advantageous tax base. We have 660 acres or so, and many other acres around town, lying fallow because we couldn't get the people the permits in time, and the crash came and set everybody back on their heels. Now that's not the way to run a town in the Rust Belt area that has roads and bridges that were built for horse and carriage, people on foot. And not heavy trucks that have to cross the bridges and roads today. The lake itself started out as summer cottages for people who could afford the properties. Once the dam was built and the lake came to fruition, the lake was raised 4 feet twice, was 8 feet lower at one time. It was raised once for the factories, and it was raised once for the boat traffic. When they raised it the second time, it wiped out the beaches that the town people used to come to enjoy during the summer as an enjoyable exercise. Now, People don't want any cars going around the road at the lake, and they don't want any more boats in the water. Certainly don't want any businesses in the area that might encourage people to use the lake more. Condos? Oh no, we don't want any condos. Because if we have condos, that might allow younger people with young children to come to the lake and use it when we would rather have our peace and quiet. Many of the people that you have heard speaking on the commission tonight have been against development in their own backyard for many, many years, and have the time and money to participate in local government when other people, and that's most of the people, don't. So they control things, and they manage to slow down development to the point where we now have no credit rating. At this particular time, we can't get a bond to do the roads and bridges or any other new bondable things that we want to do. When I first retired here, I owned the house with my wife since 1974. But when I first retired here, I talked to the head of the Democratic Town Committee, and I asked him a lot of questions, and I told him while I was talking to him up here at the lake that nobody wants development in our town. And he said to me, "Oh, you mean people don't want development in their own backyard?" And I said, "That's true. They're hesitant to have any development in Winchester, where the farms used to be at one time. It was all farm country in the olden days, and some mining was done there as well. That's what Caleb Beach used to do. You certainly don't want any more development at Highland Lake and perhaps even West Hill Pond. And factories? Oh, no, we don't want any factories. I keep telling them we can still get clean factories that don't pollute the environment, and that we should be looking for that. But what we really need, and I don't think these regulations are going to do the trick. I think they're good to have these new regulations. I think that will help us in a lot of ways, but they won't do miracles. We need to grow the grand list. We need to get more advantageous revenue, and that's revenue that brings in more money than it costs the people to live in the town, so that we can invest in the future. The people here speak well. I've heard them now for 10 years. They haven't done anything, and I don't see this getting any better without some major change. Now, for many years, they have had a downtown plan of development since 1990, but they've never been able to implement it. Local elderly citizens, and I'm not young myself, tell me that over the years, the last 40 years or so, we've had a lot of opportunities to get in big box stores, to get in factory outlets, to get in an Alzheimer's rest home up by the where our health center is, to get in elderly housing on the 660 acres. It just goes on and on. We've had a lot of opportunities, but we have not been open and friendly to people who want to come to our town. We have a tendency to say, here's what we want you to bring to our town, not how can we help you bring to our town the things that both you and we need. It has to be fair. It has to be balanced. Now, I've showed you tonight a lot of pictures of my local history around here since I was a child, and my grandparents and a few other pictures like that. And I did it on purpose because things are evolutionary. Darwin was right. People started out with a cottage, they added to it and added to it and added to it as they got more money to spend. And they still want to do that for themselves, their children, their relatives, and the future owners of their property. Section 10.6 has not helped the matter. Its cancellation from the local regulations will retard a lot of the growth because it's all that people can afford, and it must happen over a long period of time. I'm glad to see the regulations updated. I think that will do some good. But there is no miracle cure from what I heard tonight. Good night to all. Please sign the petition that's circulating the lake and show up for the public hearing on September 20th or near whenever it's finally scheduled for. And if you're leaving town for the winter, try to delay leaving, or if you leave, come back for the public hearing, and let's balance these planning and zoning regulations. Thank you. Brian O'Haron, Spreading the Word, Episode 4, Financial Winstead, owner of property in the town of Winchester, city of Winstead, at Highland Lake since 1974. We developed it over the years from an old cottage built in 1926 and one built in 1908 to what it is today. Other people would like to do the same thing. Please help them by signing the petition and showing up for the public hearing on September 20th or a nearby date. Thank you. Good night.